Over its lifetime, the Assassin's Creed franchise has undergone plenty of identity crises and interpretations that are all spins on the same basic premise. Stealth action gameplay with an open world that's fully explorable through climbing and freerunning. Somehow, that's still a fairly unique mix of ideas that few franchises have really copied. The only one that really comes to mind is Watch Dogs, but since that's also Ubisoft, it feels like cheating to bring that game up. But it's weird to think that no other franchise has tried to take Assassin's Creed's core gameplay concepts and spin them into their own thing. Sure, other games took the synchronization towers, but the only other games that have a similar sort of vibe are the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and War games, and even then, they're closer to the Batman Arkham games than anything else. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's weird that we don't have another game that utilizes stealth action and parkour in a way similar to Assassin's Creed at all. But then again, there's a pretty good reason for that. Ubisoft has never really perfected the formula of Assassin's Creed. The first game was a repetitive but interesting attempt to give the player agency throughout the main story. You chose the order to hunt your targets and the activities needed to gain information, but the story didn't feel interesting enough to tie the whole experience together. But there was clearly something that worked very well with the basic gameplay. Chuck in some parkour gameplay that was rough around the edges, sure, but let you string together some cool movement combos, and it managed to be a lot of fun. Assassin's Creed 2 was a bit of a course correction with a far more colourful setting, endearing characters, and a more focused narrative. Gone were the player-led assassinations in lieu of a linear series of missions that gave you a variety of different objectives to try and keep things fresh. This is the formula that Ubisoft stuck with for a while, and they all started to lean more heavily towards action-focused gameplay, while stealth took the back seat and offered next to no evolution on its mechanics. Assassin's Creed 3's big stealth feature, for example, was the ability to hide in a bush, which isn't very interesting. Unity is where Ubisoft tried to go back to the series' roots for the first time and offer a slower-paced game that prioritized stealth and took out some of the new action elements like kill streaks and instant kill counters. Unity had plenty of problems, but I think this was the right direction to go in, and it seemed like Assassin's Creed was starting to pin down what it wanted to be. Then we had Syndicate, which felt like a bizarre course correction back to a more action-y game with faster-paced combat once again, and new additions like a grappling hook and the Victorian version of Burnout Revenge. Syndicate still had Unity's core stealth mechanics, but you could see where the path was trending towards yet again. Then we had Assassin's Creed Origins, which was once again a return to the roots of sorts. With an emphasis on stealth, plus a robust combat system in case things didn't go to plan, this game also brought Assassin's Creed into its RPG era, which started off promising but quickly spiraled out of control. Odyssey and Valhalla are both good games in their own right, but are bogged down by overbearing RPG mechanics, massive amounts of content that bloat their playtimes, and a lack of focus in the main narrative because they have to tie in their massive worlds into the plot. And yet again, these two games had a much higher emphasis on combat. Stealth was still an option, of course, but it felt like it took a back seat to the rest of the experience. So take a guess where Ubisoft decided to go next with the series. Assassin's Creed Mirage is a return to the series' roots, but this time Ubisoft really means it. Gone is the emphasis on combat, say goodbye to a linear mission structure, and the dense RPG systems are no more. This is a classic Assassin's Creed game through and through, systemically at least. And it's interesting that this game exists at all. It serves as both a commentary of the series' pattern so far, while also being proof that the massive scope of Odyssey and Valhalla might simply be too big for their own good. The problem is that Ubisoft has manufactured a gigantic rift in the fanbase over the last 15 years by flip-flopping on the kind of game it wants Assassin's Creed to be. And now we've got players that long for the classic experience of AC1, while others are more than happy to play along with the newer RPG format. Personally, I'm more a fan of the tighter, shorter experiences found in the earlier games, so Mirage is exactly what I was looking for. Unfortunately, Mirage is still far from a perfect game and adds to the track record of a series that can't quite nail each and every one of its systems. Things are still clashing here, which makes this game more of a mixed bag in lots of ways. But let's start with the basics. This time around, you inhabit the role of Basim, a street thief in Baghdad who gets himself into trouble and ends up joining the Hidden Ones about an hour into the game. Mirage wastes next to no time getting you into its loop, which gave me whiplash after sitting through the nearly 15 hours I put into Valhalla's prologue. Within about 2 hours, you've already got your cool outfit, hidden blade, and are on your way to taking down your first target. But you don't have to truck along with the main story immediately. There's side content to do here like the classic synchronization towers, and plenty of collectibles in the form of gear chests, enigmas that lead to treasure, and even some cool locations like caves with some secrets inside. While Mirage is a return to form in many ways, it's not like Ubisoft has deleted everything that worked in the previous few games. It'd be more accurate to say that Mirage is a vastly scaled down version of Origins, if anything. An interesting course correction is the way missions play out now. There isn't really a linear sequence of missions to follow through or massive quest chains that you have to work through. Instead, we have investigations, and even though they largely play out like standard quests, the fact that you can tackle them in any order you want adds a lot to the experience. It's nowhere near as repetitive as it all played out in AC1, and it's not as linear as later games became. It's a mixture of both formats, and seeing how the narrative builds throughout this web of clues and targets is cool. It's probably the first time this series has actually felt like you're playing as an assassin stalking their target and gaining information about them. And if there's one thing that Mirage handles almost perfectly, it's the tone. The older games in the series always had this interesting balance in the atmosphere that felt tense while using the sights and sounds of the time period to carry the rest of that soundscape. It's a mix that Mirage has once again perfected, and it makes sneaking and exploring through Baghdad feel more appropriate for a game where you're hunting down and killing a group of Illuminati members.
This ends now.
The approach that Mirage takes with the actual assassinations also feels genuinely thought through this time, as opposed to prior entries that slapped a target in an area and told you to just go get them, often leading you to stabbing the target a couple of times and jogging away from the scene of the crime. Now you have several clearly laid out approaches to handling the main targets that makes these levels feel like mini sandboxes with plenty of little actions you can take to gain information. It's most similar to Unity and Syndicate, which also had unique ways to kill targets, though here it feels a lot better due to the level design feeling better constructed. The rest of the game does feel mostly like a reskin of Valhalla, though most of the RPG systems have been gutted. So exploration and loot rewards are more limited this time around. Gear chests contain either outfits, weapons, or upgrade schematics for both, but there are only around 2 new outfits and weapons to find in these chests this way. And then there are 3 upgrade schematics for each, so most gear chests will just unlock an upgrade for your gear rather than new gear itself. And the upgrades just don't matter at all, frankly. So chests don't really have a ton of value here, though I can't help but put everything on pause while I go off and hunt them down because I am likely brain damaged. There's still a skill tree to spend points on too, but it's an extremely bare bones group of abilities. One skill tree is almost entirely devoted to upgrades for your pet eagle and Kidu, while another focuses on your inventory, while the last one is just for core abilities like breaking your fall when landing and throwing knives in the air. Again, this is all in service to going back to the series' roots, so how does the core gameplay fit around that ideal when the other systems seem to follow suit? Well, the gameplay itself is essentially just Valhalla again, with all the same game feel problems present once again. Parkour still feels sticky and stiff to the point where climbing objects and buildings feels far less cool than it should. Then there are times where Basim simply won't go where you think he will, leading to moments of confusion as your flow breaks for seemingly no reason other than the game lost the will to, work. There's still no straight up jump button either, so you can't manually jump in a direction at all. You have to hope that the game will automatically choose the correct path you want to go, and that's a huge problem while you're sneaking in a base and want to go a specific way to avoid detection. I don't quite understand why freerunning has taken such a steep decline in the series when it's really the main thing it's known for. It's not the stealth, combat, open world, or even story that Assassin's Creed is primarily known for. It is the freerunning and parkour movement systems. So the fact that it feels this stiff and wrong is a massive problem that drags the fun factor down quite a bit. It's not all bad news though. Stealthing around Baghdad offers the best sneaking gameplay this series has ever managed to do. Areas feel well constructed, giving you plenty of hiding spots and places to scale to navigate the environment more easily, and the simple act of moving from cover to cover while dispatching enemies feels great to pull off. It's smooth, snappy, and when it works, brilliant. Stealth isn't completely free from weird issues though. Inconsistent animation lengths lead you to getting caught during some assassination animations. The auto-dragging behind walls can sometimes work against you and cause Basim to plop a dead guard in front of his friends. And then there's issues with logic where an enemy can see you killing their friend from a bush or hay bale and won't really react much to it at all. I'm also not a fan of assassination and attacking being on the same input, and that makes situations where you go to assassinate someone but end up swinging a sword instead way too common of a problem. Of course, you can mitigate running into this issue with Assassin's Focus. This slows down time and lets Basim mark targets and assassinate them in quick succession. It's essentially the mark and execute mechanic from Splinter Cell Conviction and Blacklist, and I've seen lots of people upset at its inclusion here, but I don't mind it too much. I actually forgot it was there for most of the game, to be honest, but it certainly helped out when I needed to use it in a pinch. When all of Mirage's systems work correctly, it's a ton of fun, but Assassin's Creed is at the point where these growing pains feel a little ridiculous. I do want to emphasize that I think this is all a gigantic improvement overall though. The gameplay itself isn't much different from Odyssey or Valhalla, but it's the context for why you should stealth that makes it all work. Add in the higher lethality of enemies, and this is the best stealth that Assassin's Creed has probably ever had. When Basim isn't sneaking or struggling to climb a wall, he's in combat. This is where I have most of my problems with Mirage. Combat is once again going back to its roots with a system that is a mishmash of old AC combat with the feeling of the newer RPG titles. The core of the combat lies in parrying enemies to drain their stagger meter, which opens them up to an instant kill when depleted. The problems start when you look at how most fights usually play out. An enemy will use a regular attack while they'll glow yellow when he can be parried, or they'll glow red which signals an attack is coming that has to be dodged. This yellow light, red light combat system is extremely simplistic and lacks that same punchy feeling that even AC1 managed to capture. It's not very interesting to stand still and wait for enemies to do the thing while you press 2 buttons and see Basim perform one of 3 animations every time. With the inclusion of a stamina meter that punishes any sort of offensive play, the best option is really to just stand still and wait for enemies to do the thing that'll lead to their instant deaths. And yes, that's basically how it worked before, but it feels far less challenging and interesting here. There's a bigger discussion for how Assassin's Creed handles its combat waiting to be had, but for now I'll say that Mirage has simplified things too much while struggling to make anything feel cool or satisfying to pull off. Combat should be challenging in these games, while also being mechanically satisfying to play around with, but Mirage doesn't manage to make any of this stuff compelling. When you break it down, Mirage's biggest problem is more of a series-wide issue, and it's that none of these mechanics and systems work anywhere near as well as they should. There are so many idiosyncrasies in gameplay, little bugs, and ideas that don't mesh well here with the grander concept of the stealth game it's trying to be. But it's all there on paper, it just can't really execute it all that well. So at this point, I have to ask myself, why do I like this game as much as I do? It might not seem like it, but I've actually had a blast with Mirage even through all of its problems. But maybe that's because I'm used to Assassin's Creed being this jumbled mess of mechanics that don't really play well with each other. At the end of the day, these games are still mostly unique in the medium, and no other game operates like AC does. We don't have anything else that gives us parkour, stealth action gameplay, and a weird mix of historically based science fiction. It's an awesome mixture of things that has the capacity to work brilliantly, but Ubisoft just can't seem to get the balance right. When it works, Mirage gives me the exact kind of experience I want from AC. Basim feels incredibly cool to play as in this game, a man focused on performing his job as an assassin to the letter, and it's that focus and drive in the narrative that helps to propel the game's systems further when they all work in tandem with each other. Assassin's Creed Mirage is a weird game that tries to make everyone happy, but like I mentioned earlier, Ubisoft has dug a big hole for itself and ensured that no one can truly be satisfied. Fans of RPG Creed probably won't like many of Mirage's simplified systems, and fans of classic Creed probably still dislike the fact that there are skill trees and other RPG mechanics muddying the stealth action gameplay. If Ubisoft is willing to continue making smaller games like this, then I'll be extremely happy to play through them. But knowing me, I'll begrudgingly play through anything this series churns out. Assassin's Creed just gets me in my bones, and I hope for the day when I can confidently say these games are finally perfecting their mechanics. For now, Mirage is a step in the right direction, but this series has a long way to go still.